She gave it to him. He was overwhelmed. No one had ever given him anything this valuable. He had always picked up rags from the street to dress in, cast-off clothing that people didn't want anymore. He had no idea where it had come from or why she had given it to him. But he thanked her profusely. And she said, "It's fine, it's okay. You see, years ago we had a son. He was about your age. He was about your size when he died. These were his clothes. We have no use for them now. We've kept them all these years, but now we pass them along to you. You can use them." The first time he had heard that men had had a son. That explains some of his bitterness. That explains some of his anger. It also explained why the potter was so hesitant to take the boy on and teach him. Because you see, in Korea at that time, the potter's trade was passed from father to son, to son, to son, to son. In fact, a few centuries later, that would become law in Korea, that the potter's trade had to be passed through the bloodline of the family. And the boy knew, being an orphan, he was not of anyone's bloodline, certainly not men's. Next, however, men began to teach him how to drain the clay, how to get just the right amount of water out, and how to sift it to the point that it was just the right texture to be made into pots. It was not something you could look and see and tell. It was not something you could measure and tell. It was something you had to learn with your fingertips. When it was drained sufficiently, when it was of a smooth enough texture to be made into pots, only your fingertips could tell you. And the boy worked at it and worked at it and worked at it and continued to work and drain the clay again and again until finally he was able to feel what the other potters felt, what men felt, the smoothness of the texture. At that point, he took a chance and asked men if he would allow him to study what he did. Maybe one day to work at the potter's wheel. Men adamantly refused. He reminded the boy that this passed from father to son, and he had no son. There would never be an opportunity for the boy, Trier, to study the potter's art. Just get used to it. He would be a laborer. About that time, an emissary came from the emperor, from the capital. The emperor would commission certain potters to make beautiful vases and beautiful urns and beautiful pots to decorate the public buildings and the palaces in the capital. Men already had a reputation for being one of the finest potters in all of Korea. He made a whole table of pots, and the emissary was impressed. But something else had happened. One of the other potters had found a way to engrave and inlay other colors into the pot, using different colors of clay and painting them on. The boy had watched him, the other potter, do this. He knew how this worked. And so the emissary came back to men and said, "We love your work. You're the finest artist here, but there is the new art form that's come along. If you can do that, send us some samples. We will consider a commission." So it was the boy who went and found the clay that the other potter had found to use for paint. It was the boy who showed men how he had seen the other potter work the engraving into the pot. And when men learned it, sure enough, he was even better than the originator. He made several pots and said, "You can do something for me," to the boy. "You can take these pots to the capital." It was a great distance away, many days' travel. "You can show them to the emissary of the emperor, and you can come back with the word as to whether or not he will commission more." The boy was so excited he couldn't stand it. They made a special container like a backpack that would protect the pots. They packed them with straw. It was his great adventure to travel across the mountains, to take these pots to the emissary of the emperor, to see if he could serve men in this way. He worried about his friend, Crane Man. But Men's wife had already taken care of that. She had asked Crane Man to come and help them out in exchange for food, to be sure that he would be taken care of. So Trier didn't have to worry about his friend. Free as a bird, with a few round coins with holes in the middle to buy food and the rice cakes that the potter's wife had made for him, he started his great adventure, his journey. He went across the mountains for days, from village to village to village, until finally he went to see one of the great sights of Korea. It was on his way. It wasn't far out of the way, but it was in an isolated area. And as he was there, he heard voices. The voices of robbers. The voices of people who thought he was carrying rice in that backpack, and they were going to steal it. And when they opened it and found that there was no rice, they were angry. And when they saw the pots, they knew they couldn't sell them because no one would buy something so fine from them. It was obviously stolen. And so the robbers, to spite the boy, threw the pots off the edge of the cliff, and he could hear them smash as they hit the ground below. All of his work and all of his travel had been for nothing. Now he had nothing to show. He had no pots to show to the emissary of the emperor. He had failed in his adventure and in his journey. The robbers took everything else they could from him. So as he went back down to the bottom of the hill, he looked, and one of the pots had been shattered into fine pieces. But the other one had landed in a bed of sand, and there was a shard, a single shard left that was large enough to show the engraving and to show the quality of the pot. And the boy took the clay that he always had with him. He always made tiny animals from clay. He was continually practicing that, and he covered the sharp edges of the shard, and he wrapped it in a piece of cloth that was left over, and he took it to the emissary of the emperor. The guard at the gate didn't want to let him in, but the boy persistently talked his way in. The emissary had seen him before, had seen him working with and for men. And finally, when the boy brought the shard in, not a whole pot, just a broken piece, the assistants to the emissary laughed at him and wanted to send him away, but the emissary wouldn't allow it. He took the shard and he took the clay from around it. He could see the quality of the work, even from that single broken piece. And he wrote a commission. He asked how many pots could men reasonably make each year. And he ordered exactly that many. And he sent the commission back with the boy, and he sent the boy back by a sea route that was quicker and safer. When the boy arrived with the commission, there was all celebration. Except, after the celebration of the commission had died down, they broke the news to him that his friend Crane Man had died in his absence. And his heart broke. He walked back to the bridge that they had slept under, the bridge that his friend had fallen off of when he had simply been bumped by a cart, and his one leg wouldn't keep his balance, and so he fell from the bridge to the ground beneath.